Hey everybody, welcome. If you can hear me, would you just let me know in the chat box, please? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie Ann. All right. Hey Floretta, just can't see you. Now hopefully you can see me. All right, we got 4 minutes. I am so excited you're here. Got 4 minutes before we start. So I would love it if you would share where in the world you are. I'm assuming you're a kindergarten teacher, but if you're not a kindergarten teacher, please do share what you teach. And then also, if this is your summer, I know we have some down under teachers and it's not their summer, but if it's your summer break, I'd love it if you'd share something fun that you're doing. Hey, Betsy, Michelle, Jackie, welcome. Hi, Elizabeth. Jennifer, welcome. Stacy, Anna in New York, welcome. Chandra in Oklahoma, welcome. Hey, Kathy in Boston. Welcome, Kathy, Rachel, Jen. It's going so fast. Hope, Michelle, Misty. So Jen's moving from first to K. Awesome. Loretta, welcome. Hey, Kim, another Tennessee teacher. Barbara, welcome. Corolla in South Carolina, welcome. Hey, Sarah in Illinois. Christina in Michigan. Jessica, welcome. Janelle, Renee, Deborah, Erin, Marissa, Melinda, Christy, Krista, Vicky. Welcome, everybody. Oh, it's Michelle's son's first birthday. Happy birthday to your son, Michelle. Colleen, welcome. Erica, welcome. Tamika, welcome. Darcy, we are hanging out as a family by the pool. That's awesome. That's why I love the internet, right? Ashley, Renee. Oh, I guess you could have meant that you're just hanging out. Not right now, but that's cool if you're at the pool right now too. Lindsay, welcome. Katrina, welcome. Kate in Peoria, welcome. Katrina, welcome. Diana, pre-K. Teaches blind and visually impaired. Allison with 1L from Texas. Welcome, Allison. Michelle in Chicago. This is scrolling so fast. I'm so excited you all are here. Muriel, thank you. Jackie is a family child care provider, specializing in kinder prep. Very cool. Hey, Cassandra. Antoinette, Jimena, hope I'm saying that correctly. Heidi in Illinois, welcome. Kara's moving from creative writing to kindergarten. Wow, it's a big shift. Catherine's getting some conscious discipline training. Awesome. Hello, Kathy in Atlanta. I used to teach in Atlanta a long time ago, like 10 years. Ivy, welcome. Cynthia says, very excited for this webinar. Awesome. So just a couple of things while we are waiting for everybody to come on in. Google Chrome is the best browser. That's what the software company says anyway for these workshops. So if you're having trouble, you can definitely try to switch browsers. Google Chrome is what they recommend. I will warn you, we had a lot of people sign up for the webinar tonight or today, depending on where you are. So there is a possibility that the chat box will fill up. Now, if that happens to you, just keep trying. Sometimes it'll open up and you can get something in, but I know it can be frustrating, so just kind of be aware of that. If it does fill up, it's just a tech issue. For some reason, they don't limit the number of people on a workshop or a webinar, but they limit the number of people in the chat, which I think is kind of silly, but whatever. I didn't make the software. So just be aware of that. If you have any tech problems, hopefully it'll be all smooth sailing for us tonight. But should you have any tech issues on your end, try a different browser. You can always go back to those reminder emails that I sent out and rejoin using the link. If it ever looks like me on my end, like it goes black here, I will be back. I have 2 computers. I have a laptop here for backup just in case we need it. Once in a while that'll happen. Doesn't usually happen, but last week my computer decided to shut down and update in the middle of the workshop. So if I ever go away, I will be back, not to worry. Hey, Kathy, Brittany, there should be a reconnect button on your end if something does go wrong also, just a heads up about that. Heather, welcome. Heather says, I find it's easier to log into the webinar at least 30 minutes prior to access the chat room. That's a good tip. I didn't know that. So if you log in earlier, usually then Heather has found that you can get into the chat better. Okay, let's see who else is here. Amanda's here, LaDonna's here, Cassidy's here. Aisha, this is live as we are speaking right now. Donna, welcome. All right, everybody. Well, again, I am so excited that you're here. Lots of teachers here tonight, or today, depending on where in the world you are. I'm excited to chat with you about guided reading in kindergarten. Hopefully you got the memo, but this is just really about kindergarten tonight. So in the past, I've done workshops that are for kinder, first, and second grade. Now I really want to focus on 1 grade level, and then if for some reason you signed up for the wrong one, just be aware that there is a first and second grade guided reading workshop that I'm doing tomorrow night live. And if you are in the wrong one, not to worry. You're welcome to leave if you don't teach kindergarten or don't work with kindergarten age students, but just know that you can sign up then for tomorrow nights. You can go to learningattheprimarypond.com, click on workshops, and then you can see the sign up for that. So just a heads up in case you missed it, but we are going to be focusing on kindergarten tonight. I'm very excited about that. So in a second, you're going to see the screen change and you are going to see the first slide of my presentation. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get going. Again, thank you so much for being here. Excited to chat with you tonight. We did go over some of those housekeeping items like Google Chrome being the best browser. Try to reconnect if you're having issues. Go back to the original link and use a different browser or a different device if you can. But hopefully it'll all be smooth sailing. There is a delay. So whatever you're hearing me say right now, I actually said 20 seconds ago. So just something to keep in mind as we're chatting back and forth. Speaking of chatting, please do use that comment box, that chat box. Ask questions, answer each other's questions, add on to what I'm saying. This is what I really like about our little virtual room is that we can all learn from each other. So please do feel free to use that chat box. I miss things in the chat box, especially with so many teachers here tonight. So just know that if I do miss what you said, it's totally unintentional, but I will scroll back periodically and try to catch comments and questions that I missed. May want to grab paper and pencil to take notes. I do have a freebie for you at the end, but there still may be some things said that you want to jot down. And I think that's about it. So a lot of you I recognize names, so welcome back. I'm excited you're here. If we don't know each other yet, my name is Allison. Excited to have you on your webinar or a webinar for the first time. I am a literacy specialist and I work at kind of an alternative school setting. We work primarily with students who have learning issues or the traditional public or private school setting just isn't quite working for them. So I do reading intervention. And before becoming a literacy specialist, I taught pre-K. I taught kindergarten for several years, absolutely my favorite grade to teach. Also taught first and second. So I've been working in schools for about 12 or 13 years now. I live in the Nashville suburbs with my husband, Jonathan, and we have 2 little fur babies. This is Max and this is Lindsay. So that's me. So here is our agenda. This is the plan. We're going to start off by talking about making groups at the beginning of the year, because when you're teaching guided reading, that's done in a small group setting, as I'm sure you already know. And with kindergarten, it's a little bit different because when you're working with like the upper grades, you might just find the reading level and then you're good to go. But we all know that with kindergarten, it's not always quite that easy. So we'll talk about how to do that. And then we'll spend a good chunk of time talking about teaching guided reading to pre-A readers. So children who aren't really reading traditionally yet. What do you do with them in guided reading? We're going to talk all about different kinds of activities you can use. Then we're going to talk about what our lessons can look like if we're working with kids at level A. We'll also talk about a common problem that I know I've faced and maybe some of you have faced too. What do we do if our students get stuck at level A and they're just not progressing? We're also going to talk in some depth about how to teach lessons when our kids are at level B, level C, level D. And then we'll talk just briefly, what do we do when we have kiddos who are like beyond that and they're just really advanced readers? We'll talk a little bit about that too. And then last but not least, we have a giveaway. So make sure that you are staying live for the whole hour. I think it'll be about an hour, giving away guided reading bundles, 2 different things that you get if you are a winner. So make sure that you're live for that you stay here live for that. So I'll talk about those guided reading resources that are in the giveaway. And then at the end, I share the freebie. And if you've been on a workshop with me before, then you know that the reason why I share the freebie at the end is because if you are opening tabs and just have other stuff open, then it increases the likelihood that this video could crash for you. So make sure all your tabs are closed. I will share that freebie at the end because it'll open in a new tab. Okay, so on that agenda, you probably saw I was talking about levels A, B, C, D, and those are the Fountas and Pinnell guided reading levels. However, I know that we don't all use the same leveling system. I know that some teachers, some schools don't even use a leveling system. But I kind of wanted to find out from you what book leveling system you use. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and type in the chat box. Do you use the FNP levels? Do you use something different? Go ahead and let me know. I see FNP. I see a lot of FNP. I see DRA. DRA, FNP. Woo, so fast. So I see some reading A to Z levels. Lexiles, I see. Rigby, okay. Dibble. So I see a lot of FNP and DRAs. Okay, so hopefully this little correlation chart will pretty much cover all of us then. If you do not use one of these leveling systems, just give us a shout out in the chat box and maybe another teacher will know the correlation. But I wanted to put this here because during the presentation, I am going to talk about level A, level B, level C, level D. So I want to make sure that you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this stuff. So if we're talking about DRA, I really do not know DRA, but I guess it was labeled as A1 when I looked at it in a correlation chart. So level 1, A1. For B, level 2. For level C, so some level C books are labeled as 3s, which are less difficult than the 4s, and then for Ds we have levels 5 and 6. And then I believe I put reading recovery levels. So I want to say, I don't know why I have 6 here. I'm assuming this should say 5 and 6. I just noticed that, sorry. But for this would be for reading recovery, I believe Rigby as well. They use these levels, so they're pretty similar to the DRA levels, but this is just a correlation chart. In case you don't use the FNP levels, I will be talking exclusively about the FNP levels, so maybe jot it down or just make a mental note so that what I'm saying makes sense to you. One big issue that I wanted to address, since we're talking about kindergarten, is when do you start, right? Because for guided reading to take place, this is when you're teaching kids literacy skills in a small group, and that's awesome, but the other kids have to be able to work independently, right? So first day of school, that's probably not gonna happen, right? You're not gonna be able to come in, pull a small group, and have all the other kids just work on their own and be totally independent. So my rule of thumb is to wait about 6 weeks before I start guided reading. I just want to have enough time to teach those procedures and routines and activities so that the kids can work independently, you know, whether it's, I don't know, sorting alphabet letters or, you know, handwriting, just things that they can do on their own. So that takes time to get them to the point where they can work independently so that I can pull a small group, right? And tonight we are focusing on just guided reading, so the actual teaching that happens in that small group. I do have another workshop on literacy centers, and I have a live workshop coming up this summer on how to launch literacy centers. Same thing for Daily 5 or whatever type of independent work you do. So at the end, I'll share those links, but just kind of be aware, today we're just focusing on the teaching that happens in the small group. And then I do have other workshops and resources for you if you want to talk more about, you know, what the other kids are doing while you're teaching guided reading. Okay, so let's chat about making groups. Now I'm going to share some ideas and some things that I do with my kiddos. I typically have worked with either kids that are struggling, so as a reading specialist, or before when I was in the classroom, it was mostly with populations of students that probably hadn't been to pre-K, low socioeconomic levels, not coming into kindergarten knowing a ton of letters or whatever. But I know that depending upon where you teach, you could have many of your kindergartners coming in reading. So the way that you test the kids and group them at the beginning of the school year is really going to depend on the level of your kids. So if you have some pre-readers, kids that are not reading yet, I like to assess letter sounds, phonological awareness, and both of these things are assessments that I do one-on-one. I was fortunate enough when I taught kinder in the classroom to have days before school started when I did a meet and greet with the families, and that's when I did those one-on-one assessments real quick. I know that we don't all have that, but I feel like if you can get an aide or just somebody to help with that, like that one-on-one assessment data is so valuable. You'll see that I left letter name knowledge out of here. I do definitely assess letter names, but when it comes to planning guided reading groups, yes, we work on letter names, but when it comes to reading, what really helps them not being able to name the letters, but the letter sounds. So just to reiterate, I teach letter names, I assess letter names, but when it comes to how well are they reading, letter sounds is really what pushes them in the right direction. So that's why I have that listed here. Another thing that I like to do is I will, to the entire class, I'll read aloud like a double A or A, level A pattern book. Maybe you read it once or twice. Then I'll meet with the kids one-on-one and see, can they pretend read it back to me? Are they getting the picture? Because there's, some kids may know like 20 letter sounds. There's 2 kids that know 20 letter sounds each, right? They could be in the same guided reading group, but they also might not be, because you might have one kid who knows 20 letter sounds and they can do some pointing one-to-one and they get the pattern of the book and, they know how to turn the pages. But that other kid who knows 20 letter sounds, for example, they might not have as many print concepts down. So that's why I like to also include this little activity when I'm assessing the kids. So I take their letter sound knowledge, phonological awareness, and their ability to read that pattern book. I take all 3 of those things into account when I'm forming my guided reading groups. In your freebie, I actually have a whole little assessment for you. Letter sounds, letter names, phonological awareness, and I think some tracking charts. So that is going to be in your freebie, which again, I'm sharing at the end. So that will kind of give you some guidance if you don't already have a really good assessment to work with when you're trying to get to know your kids and form guided reading groups. Okay, so that was pre-readers, right? Like that gives us information about kids that are not reading yet. But some of us maybe have kids that are reading when they enter kindergarten. And so it's not necessarily that I don't do letter sounds and phonological awareness assessments with these kids, but I also want to know their reading level, right? So when I'm trying to find a reading level, kindergarten or really any grade, I recommend something called the Fountas-Pinnell Benchmark Assessment System. It's a one-on-one assessment that has them reading books to you and finding their level. DRA, I haven't looked at anything DRA in like over 10 years, but I believe it's similar. Reading A to Z also has printable benchmark books, running records and questions that you can ask the kids. And all of these assessments will help you find your students' reading levels. Just something to remember, whatever assessment you're using, a reading level equals decoding plus comprehension. So sometimes you may have kids who come into kindergarten and you're like, whoa, they are like super high readers, like, they can read just about any word, but not all of them will have comprehension at that high level, right? First of all, they may just be word callers, some of them. And second of all, sometimes the more advanced books just have concepts that kindergarteners are not developmentally ready for yet, right? So just keep that in mind, where you might have a kiddo who can decode super well, but comprehension also comes into play when you're figuring out their reading level. Somebody's telling me DRA and FNP assessment is very similar, Allison. Thank you, Alexandria. So Denise says TRC M-Class is what North Carolina teachers use, text reading and comprehension assessments. Yes, I've heard of that. I just don't know much about it. Awesome. Other people are sharing other assessments that they use. Okay, so Carolyn wants some clarification about the little book reading activity. Yeah, so I read the story, Carolyn, as a whole group, and then I have them individually retell, or it's not really retelling, it's more like pretend reading the book. So if the book was like, we're reading one the other day, it's like, I like such and such, I like ice cream, or I like pizza, I like blah, blah, blah. And it's just the pattern is repeated over and over again. So read it a whole group. You can also do it small group, but then have the kids read that same book to you one-on-one and see, like, did they remember the pattern? Are they trying to point? Just to try to get a sense of those print concepts. Stacy says reading A to Z books can be easier. It's not always the best assessment. Yeah, I do agree, Stacy. Like sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder depending on the level. So reading A to Z does have a correlation chart, and the F&P levels and the reading A to Z levels are a little bit different in some cases. So just something to keep in mind too. Okay, let's talk about guided reading for pre-A. So you've got your group set up, and maybe you have one or likely more than one group that is at a pre-A level. So that means that they're not yet reading level A text with 90% or above accuracy. So just to give you a little idea, and you probably know most of this, but pre-A readers, they're still learning how books work. So they're learning those print concepts. That means, every spoken word equals one word in the print. That includes pointing one-to-one, understanding that words are separated by spaces, left to right tracking, even some kids holding the book, turning the pages, where to start reading, all of those things. They're still working on all of that. They can be very diverse in needs, interestingly enough, right? So you can have some pre-readers who they come in, they can't even write their name. And then you have some pre-readers, maybe they know most or all of their letter sounds, but they're just not quite ready to do those level A texts yet. And I also have down here that guided pre-A students or students at a pre-A level can and should participate in guided reading. You don't have to leave them out of your small group guided reading rotations. There absolutely are activities that we can and should do with them. It just looks a little bit different. All right, so do not jot all of this down because it's in your freebie, but this is the lesson plan format. This is the exact format that I use with my pre-A readers. I'll read you each part here real quick, but then we're gonna go in depth on the following slides on each one of these little things. So it looks like a lot, but we usually begin with a little name practice. That's pretty quick, and it's only if needed, if they can't write their first name yet. We'll then work quickly on letter identification, so letter names. We'll do something for phonological awareness, which is just the sounds in words that's not associated with the letters, in print. Then we'll work on letter sounds, so connecting letter mention. And so this part is generally what I do in just about every lesson. It's quick. The pace is quick, and I feel like it's so important to get all these things in and keep their attention. So all these activities are quick, they're engaging, but I want to address all of these areas just about every time we have a lesson. However, there are some other things that somebody says they keep losing me. Oh no. Okay, maybe I'm going to connect to a different internet source. Okay. Okay, how about now? Can you guys hear me any better? I know there's like a 20-second delay here. Yes. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I'm not really sure what happened. You can try the reconnect button if it's still blurry for you. I'm going to repeat what I was saying on this slide because I know a lot of people missed it. I apologize. So let's rewind a little bit. I basically just read these things off. But what I was saying was that these things are components of just about every lesson that I teach. I try to keep a really brisk pace. So we're going from one activity to the next pretty quickly, going through them, have all my materials ready so that I can cover all of these things. But then there are also we're going to be going more in depth on each one of these components in a minute. There are also other components that I include when I have time. It's just that usually I will choose one per session. So maybe once we will do letter formation and handwriting, and then another day we'll do a little writing or sight word making or oral language and vocabulary. And again, I'm going to be going more in depth on each one of these things in a second. Just kind of wanted you to have a big picture of this, and this again is in your freebie. Let me resize this and see if this helps at all. Does this make it any less blurry? Not sure. It honestly might be Webinar Jam, the software. My friend was having trouble trying to do something with it. Hopefully You can see a little bit better here. There are slides. If somebody could put up the link for the slides that I sent out, that would be fabulous, just in case the slides are blurry for you for some reason. Okay, doke. So just reiterating in case you missed this, we talked about this whole structure. This is going to be in your freebie. And now we're going to break down each individual part, and I'm just going to show you what that can look like. And I'll talk about different activities. We don't do them all in one day, just some different ideas of what like name practice can look like. Thank you all for sharing the slides. Oh, Caitlin says click reconnect and it fixes blurriness. Awesome. All right, so practicing names. Sometimes we're just tracing names, right? If they're not quite ready to write them independently. We can make them out of magnetic letters or letter tiles. We like to write them in different colors, right? So we'll do some markers, colored pencils. In the sand, if you have like little sand boxes for them. If you take a pencil box, just a standard plastic pencil box, and you put sand in it, kids can usually fit their name in that as long as it's not too small. And then it closes up and every kid can have a little individual sand pencil box if that's something that you want to do. So basically, this is just to keep their interest, right? Using different materials. I like to do name puzzles at the beginning of the year. This is so simple, but they really love it. This is on a sentence strip. I cut apart the letters of their name, mix them up, and I put it in an envelope, just a regular size mailing envelope. And on the outside of the envelope, I will write their name so that they have a like master to compare it to. But so then they take the letters out of their envelope, they put them together to make their name. This is more of like a beginning activity before they can do a really good job writing their name. And then down here, I just have to omit this from the lesson as soon as possible, because as you saw in the previous slide, there's a lot that I like to fit in. And so as soon as the kids can write their name relatively well, then I just take this out of the lesson because we have other stuff that we have to work on. Okay, next up we do some letter identification, letter names. Now, I should have put these in a different order, but I want to point out here that one thing that you might have to do with your pre-A readers is, who maybe don't know a lot of letters, is just letter sorting by shape. So I believe one of these is sorted incorrectly, but here on this little page here, you can have the kids sort letters by, are they curved, straight, or both? Do they have curves and straight parts? Okay. You can also have them sort them. Do they have holes or do they not have holes? So when you're doing that, you're helping those kids that really don't have a lot of letter knowledge just get a sense of what letters look like. And then eventually you can have them sort by letter name. So, give them a couple of S's, a couple of O's. They're sorting by letters that are the same. That's kind of a very beginning basic activity. Another thing you can do is have them chant an alphabet chart. So an alphabet chart is just where it's the alphabet. And then there's a picture of each letter, or a picture to represent each letter. And you can incorporate letter sounds in here, but if you're just working on letter names, you can have them do A, apple, B, ball, just to practice saying it over and over again. During this part, we might practice matching capital to lowercase letters, or even writing the letter that's missing. On this particular page, it was either the lowercase or the capital letter that was missing, and they had to write in whichever one was not there. Also like to have them do letter hunts in text. So later on in the lesson, you'll see that we work with books. You can give them the book that you're going to work with and just be like, hey, find the letter such and such. That's really helping them connect what letters are for, right? Letters are for reading. Okay, so that was letter naming. Now we're moving on to phonological awareness. So phonological awareness, that is just, so you've probably heard phonemic awareness, phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is like the umbrella term, and it just means like the ability to hear and also sometimes manipulate the sounds, the individual sounds in words, right? So phonological awareness includes skills like rhyming or breaking up words into syllables, or phonemic awareness, right? Phonemic awareness is being aware of the individual phonemes or the individual sounds in words. So a phonemic awareness skill would be being able to segment the word cat into k, act. That's phonemic awareness, which again is part of the umbrella term, phonological awareness. So anyway, we work on all of these things during the phonological awareness component. Some days you may clack the words in syllables or their names, you know, Allison, Allison. We will also play Do They Rhyme. That is where I will say the name of two words, not say the name, say two words out loud. You can also show pictures. This is Do They Rhyme with pictures, hug, mug. And then the kids show thumbs up, they do rhyme, or thumbs down, they don't rhyme. Another kind of similar game is Do They Start the Same? So you say two words like sand, sap. Do they start the same? Thumbs up, thumbs down. So that's phonemic awareness. That's getting them to hear the first sound in a word. Another thing we often do is we sort pictures by their initial sounds. So do these pictures start with or do they start with s? And you can either tell them right away, like, okay, some of these pictures are gonna start like moon, and some of these pictures are gonna start like sun, or you can just give them pictures and have them figure it out, have them figure out the groups. Just depends on where they're at. Okay, so now we're moving on to letter sounds. And the way letter sounds is different from phonological awareness is that with phonological awareness, we're just working either with auditory stuff like sounds, or we're working with pictures. And when you're doing this, you may want to have the kids close their eyes at times because there's so much going on in the classroom, right? There's so much visual stimuli. And to get them to focus on the sounds and words, it helps them if you say, okay, close your eyes, I want you to listen carefully. It just helps like hone their listening skills and make sure that they don't get distracted. So phonological awareness is sounds only. And then letter sounds is just connecting those sounds to print. So I'm sure you have many awesome letter sound activities that you do already, and feel free to share those in the chat box, but just a few different things. Something that I really like to do is have them trace the letters with their finger, and that can be sandpaper, that can be, so little bumpy letters that I had one year. I don't really know how to describe it, like rubber bumpy letters. It can be just there's the letter on the page, and they trace the letter with their finger, and they say the sound. So they're tracing the A, and they're saying ah. So just getting that like motor skill with the actual saying of the letter sound. And I'm going to turn on the camera for a second because I want to show you something that I learned relatively recently about motor skills and letter sounds, or letter names, you could do it. So what I learned is that when you're getting kids to trace letters in the air, it's helpful to have them use two fingers, right? For a long time, I think I probably just had them use one. But when you have them use two fingers, you are tapping into their gross motor skills more than their fine motor skills. So fine motor skills can be forgotten more easily than gross motor skills. If you think about riding a bike, right? Like it's been a while since I rode a bike, but I could probably get on a bike tomorrow and I wouldn't, fingers crossed, fall off. That gross motor skill is in my muscle memory. And so we want to ingrain the letters into kids' muscle memory. And so I learned this from Barbara Wilson through the Wilson Reading Program, but a really great way to get kids to ingrain, learn the motor skills associated with letters and also connect that to the letter name or the letter sound is to have them use two fingers. So when you're having them trace a letter, it's kind of hard to show here on the camera, but have them kind of extend their arm, and I'm going to make the O. So I've got two fingers and I'm making the O. So when you're practicing letter sounds or even letter names, they can say ah as they're making the O, but have them use two fingers to really tap into that gross motor muscle memory that you're trying to develop. So I just wanted to show you that. Other things you can do, I'm sure you already do a lot of this. So, maybe you match initial letters to pictures. So you have the letter W and they're matching it to a picture of a watermelon. Or maybe you have pictures here and they write the sounds, little activities like that. My kids love this game. It's called Feed the Monster. And they each have it's really like bingo where they all will have different sheets, but there's different letters on here. You say a letter sound and then they cover it with a little, chip. And then whoever has all of their letters covered by the time first or whatever, then they are the winner. So it's kind of like bingo, but it's just a little variation. I'm sure you have lots of other awesome letter sounds activities, but that's just a little snippet of what that could look like. And of course, we're only doing like one of these things. We're not doing all of the things during every lesson. So next on the list was print concepts. And I mentioned some of these before, but it's just book, word, and sentence knowledge. Is this a letter? Is this a word? Where's the first letter of this word? Where's the last letter of this word? Where's the first word in a sentence? Like, many of our kids come into kindergarten not knowing this stuff, and that's fine, but it's just something that we need to work on, especially at the pre-A level. Typically, I will have them practice this in context. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about what we do with a book. So usually I'll give them the book or show them a book, and we'll talk about, okay, where's the first word in the sentence, or where's the front cover? Usually we'll just do it with a book. Occasionally I'll have another little activity, like this is just, there are letters and words on the page, and I say, okay, I want you to circle all of the words, or I want you to circle all of the letters. But generally I do it in the context of an actual book, because that's what they need to do, right? Work with books. Okay, speaking of working with books, we always work with a book in some way during the pre-A lesson. And I know it feels like a lot to fit in. I'll share with you at the end a pre-A resource that I created, because I felt like I was I had stuff all over the place and it takes time to get out materials. So I kind of came up with a little solution to that. But anyway, I know it seems like a lot to fit in, so that's why I was saying to keep the pace brisk, but I always try to fit in book reading and comprehension, because they need those experiences with books. Otherwise, they're not going to move up to level A. They're not going to move up, right? So some different things that you can do with books. You don't always have to do guided reading like you might with your higher level kids or kids that are reading traditionally. You can do a read aloud in a small group, right? So for a read aloud, your purpose would be to work on comprehension. Maybe some of those pre-A kids, maybe they're English language learners, they need a little more one-on-one or small group support, or maybe they're not actively participating in your whole group read aloud, so maybe they need a little support there. You could also do shared reading. You could take like a level A text and do a shared reading where you are reading it together, but you're kind of doing the leading. Maybe you're doing a little bit of modeling of strategies. Oh, I don't know what this word is, so I'm going to look at the first letter. It starts like, Strategies like that can be done during shared reading. In shared reading, they're seeing the print. So in the small group setting, it's not hard, because you can just have a little book and show them the words. And then sometimes we read an emergent text. So that would just be something that's like double A, or really easy level A, and we're working with a book like that. This was I think it was a double A book that I created. But so when they're working with that emergent text, it doesn't have to be like with your other levels, your higher levels, where you're like, okay, here's this book, let me introduce it, now you read it. You can provide more support to them. And I have a couple of different ways or different strategies that I use to provide support to them, and we'll talk more about those on the next page. But just kind of be aware that even reading an emergent text doesn't always look like it does at other levels. And then often with the book, if there's time and if that's a focus, we can do sentence writing. Often I won't have them write the sentence. We will write it as a group. I'll talk more about that later. But no matter what you are doing with the book, I feel like it's always so important to work on comprehension, because with these kiddos, especially if it's a couple months into the school year and we're worried, like, hey, like they're not learning all their letter sounds. We need to work on this. Like, we tend to get into that, I don't know, like drill focused, skill focused, which is important, but it's also essential that kids understand why we read. So every single pre-A lesson, there's some type of book reading that I do, and there's always work on comprehension, asking questions, getting them to talk about the text. Okay, so I mentioned that when we read a text, it's not always like, okay, here's the book, now read it, right? Because some of our kids really can't do that. That's why they're in the pre-A group to begin with. This is in your freebie, so you don't need to write it down. But this is a continuum of support, and I just created this to show you some different supports that we can give our kids when we do have like a double A or level A book for them. You can do this at any level, right? Like, I'm talking about this in the context of pre-A, but you can do this at any level to support your kids. So these go from the greatest amount of support to the least amount of support. Our goal is for the kids eventually to be able to just take a book, we introduce it, and then they whisper read it. But if your kids would need a lot of support to do that, Then something you can do to provide them a lot of support is an echo read. And that's where you have a little book, maybe it's just sentences or individual words. You pass out copies, you have your own copy, you read a page, and then the kids all read the same page. You read the next page, the kids all read the next page. So obviously that's a lot of support. A little bit less support would be a choral read, where you're all reading all the words at the same time. Again, they would have their own copies of the book. A little bit less support would be a teacher pre-read, where you just read them the book. They don't have their own copies to start, but then you have them whisper read it afterwards. I should have mentioned here, when we do an echo read with a little book, we do the echo read and then they read it on their own, whisper reading. Same thing with the choral read. We read it all together and then they read it on their own. So they're always kind of getting that whisper read experience when we do a book like this. I just provide them one of these supports at the beginning. So again, our goal, right, is for them to be able to whisper read like a double A or A text, but these are some different things you can do with them when they need a little more support to be able to do that. So thinking back to that pre-A lesson structure, everything that we've talked about up till now is the stuff that I pretty much include in every lesson, but you may, if you have time, you may want to add in like one extra thing and alternate between these. So maybe one day you work on letter formation or handwriting. Maybe some days you work on writing. That can be interactive writing where you have like the whiteboard or chart paper, and what I do is I base it on the book. So I come up with like a simple sentence based on the book and I say, okay, can you help me write it? And so I will model, I'll say the sentence, we'll all say it together 3 times. I'll draw a line for each word showing spacing. And then I might start writing it and then I'll say, oh, you know, like now I hear the sound P. Who can come and write the letter that makes the sound P? And then one of them will come up and they'll write it. So you have to keep it fast paced, obviously, but they can still participate. Another thing you can do, and it really just depends on where your pre-A readers are at, but you can do a 2 or 3 sentence, 2 or 3 word sentence at dictation. So I see I guess that would be 4 words or whatever. You have, it's short, right? Like a super short sentence that you tell them and then they write it down. Sometimes you might also want to work on sight word making. I have very mixed feelings about sight words, where obviously kids have to learn sight words. When you're becoming a reader, like eventually your sight word vocabulary is growing and growing, right? Until almost every word that you read is a sight word for you. So obviously kids have to learn sight words. But if you have kiddos and they don't really understand the concept of a word, they don't know what it is, I am against just drilling on sight words, because if it's not sticking, then there's probably another reason, like they don't get what a word is, or they're not solid enough with their letters. So sight words are important for kids to learn, but I feel like it's important to feel it out with each one of your kiddos and just be aware. If they're not sticking, there might be a reason. There might be something else that you would be better spending your time on, if that makes sense. Also important to address, there's just so many things I know, but oral language and vocabulary. So, you know, maybe some days we spend more time talking about the book, or I bring like a funny or interesting picture and I get them to talk about it. I introduce some new words. When you have English language learners or kids who just have low vocabularies, sometimes they are stuck at pre-A just because they don't have the vocabulary. So that could be another thing that you would need to address depending on your group of kids. I basically already talked about what interactive writing is. Dictation is when you tell them what to write. And then we didn't really talk about this much, but a sentence cut apart activity, love these. I had a picture here. So this book said different things like, look at the parrot, look at the map. And so what I did is I took a sentence from this book, and it's printed, but I cut apart the words. I showed them the page. I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to show you a sentence from the story, but it's all mixed up. So I show them the page real quick. I read it to them, and then I close the book. And then I have them put the words of the sentence in order. And this lends itself to so many different things, right? You can talk about, well, we know this word comes first because it starts with a capital letter. And we know this word is last because it has a period at the end. And then, you know, sight words, this word is at, it starts with a, and talk about initial letters. Just so many things you can do with a sentence cut apart activity. All right, I know some of you have been contributing some awesome ideas, so thank you so much for sharing. I'm gonna see if I can pick up a question or two. Carrie Ann says high frequency words. Yeah, so sight words, the way I use sight words is just, it's just words that, I think, Carrie Ann, what you mean is words that appear frequently, right? We're learning all of the words as sight words eventually to read them by sight. Okay, let's see if I missed other questions. Lisa, I do have a specific lesson plan template for guided reading, and I'll be sharing that with you in the freebie. Debbie says, does the cut apart sentence go with the book you are reading? Yes, usually it does, Debbie. Just to kind of tie that in. Shelly says, do you meet with every group every day? So Shelly, typically no. However, Shelly, if I do have a group that's at pre-A and it's been several months in the year, then I will make sure that I'm meeting with them every day because they're the lower ones. Juanita says, about how long is your guided reading group? So when we're fully up and running, it's usually about 15 minutes. However, we start out very small at the beginning of the year. So this whole thing that I'm showing you, when we first start guided reading, when we first launch it, it's usually not this long. I'm lucky if I get through all of this at first, but once they get into that routine, then if you add up all of these like tops, it's like 2, 4, 6, 10. It's about 15 minutes long. But that generally is how long my guided reading groups are once we're up and running and the kids know the routine. Okay, well, time is flying, so we need to keep going. I will answer more questions later for sure. But now I want to talk a little bit about what guided reading can look like at level A. So readers at level A, some of them are still learning print concepts, right? Left to right, one-to-one pointing may not necessarily be 100% solidified, right? Some of them get it. They're getting it more easily. Some of them, you've probably noticed with words that have multiple syllables, like elephant, they're pointing more than one time. So it's not always 100%. Level A readers are still using pictures extensively when they read or pretend read books, and they're also beginning to learn some easy high frequency words. Okay, so a number of the activities that we talked about with pre-A can also be used at level A, but at level A, you're doing a little more book reading because the kids actually can read the book, a level A book, right? So this, again, is going to be in your freebie. I just did the breakdown here. We'll talk more about each component, but the kids start the lesson by rereading familiar texts. I also take a running record at this time. We practice letter sounds and or sight words for just a minute. I introduce the new book. They read the book. They retell me the story or the book that we read. We discuss it, and then typically I'll teach them a strategy or review a strategy. I've tried to include this before they read the text, but if it's any sort of extended, modeling or whatever, it becomes too much. So this is why I ended up sticking it at the end of the lesson. It's still been effective for me anyway with putting it at the end of the lesson, but just to give you a little bit of background about why I no longer do this, because what happened is, we were doing some flashcards and I'd, maybe show them a strategy or remind them, and then I introduced the book and they were kind of going glassy-eyed by that time, right? That's a lot before they actually read the book. So that's why I ended up moving out here. And then there are some different things here that I will include in some of my level A lessons, just depending on what the group needs, but I don't necessarily include these in every lesson. Amanda, I just saw your question. Ask me that later if I forget to answer it about how many students. All right, so the first part of the level A lesson is to reread familiar books. So I have a basket for each group, and there are multiple copies of different books that we've read over the past week or two. So right here, I don't know if you can see, but there's like a couple of different books there. They sit down at the table. They know that immediately they pull a book, that this is something that they've read before, and they start rereading it. This develops fluency, right? And while they're rereading, this is an opportunity for me to take a running record. So I'll have one student be the star student, and I might have a little star put out on the table so that they know where they sit. But that star student sits next to me. I give them the book from the previous lesson, and I have them read it out loud to me. I take the running record, and then they retell. At level A, it really doesn't take that long because the books should be getting through them pretty quickly because they're so simple. So usually time isn't a problem at this level. At higher levels, it can be, and we will not read all of the book, but at level A, we can usually get through a whole book because it's so short. So again, I'm taking a running record on a warm read. Now, when I benchmark the kids 3 times a year, that's a cold read. That's a book that they've never read before. And sometimes I still will take running records on cold reads. You know, how is this kid going to do it at a level A text that he hasn't read before? I feel like that's valuable. But the reason why I do warm reads here is because, well, there's 2 reasons. First of all, when they read the new book, I want to be available to coach them. And second of all, during guided reading, the point is, the thing I'm trying to figure out is, or make sure of, is when they're reading with me during guided reading, I don't expect them to have fabulous success the first time they read a book. Like, they're with me so that I can provide supportive teaching. When I'm taking the running record on a warm read, I'm asking myself, given the supportive teaching that I've already given them in the previous lesson, were they able to read this book with, at level A, like 90 to 94% accuracy with good comprehension? So that's why I do it on a warm read. Again, I do cold read running records with books they've never seen before at other times. All right, next component of the lesson, just some flashcards. So it could be tricky letter sounds or some basic sight words, high frequency words. My biggest thing here is just keep it brief. So I might have a stack of things that we want to work on, but I'll set a timer. It's just about a minute. We'll get through them or less. And if we don't finish the stack, then we don't finish the stack. Next, I'll introduce the new book. So when I do this, I want to tell them a little bit about what it's about and get them excited about reading. If there's new vocabulary words, I might want to share that with them depending on what it is. So in this book, it says a tiger can leap. And for some kids, that might be a new word. So although I don't want to take out all the challenge for them, I might have them turn to that page, talk about what the tiger is doing, and then introduce the word leap so that they can be successful with that word. I don't need them to be successful with every word, and I don't need to pre-teach every word, but something like leap, that's a vocabulary word that a lot of my kids probably can learn, and it's not something that they could decode on their own, right? They're probably not going to be able to look at the L and figure out what the tiger is doing, and they're not going to know the long E spelling pattern here with the E and the A, so that's why this would be an example of a word that I might pre-teach. Some level A groups, they have enough sight word knowledge where they can just kind of get going with the pattern and be successful, but some kids will not. And so if that's the case, if I feel like they're not going to get the book pattern, I will get them reading and saying the pattern before they read on their own. So for example, this is a tiger can blah, 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 a tiger can swim, a tiger can do such and such. And so beforehand, I might say, okay, boys and girls, we're going to read about tigers today. What can a tiger do? And then I'll get them to respond. I'll get them each to say a tiger can, if they know that a tiger can hunt, they'll say a tiger can hunt. So just getting them using that language, which is especially helpful for ELLs, English language learners, getting them using that language in their mouth before they read, then they're going to be able to read the book. Whereas if a pattern is too hard for them, then they might end up struggling and it just becomes not accessible for them. Another question I just kind of want to let you think about is a complete picture walk really necessary? I know that sometimes we may have been taught like, oh yeah, do a picture walk of every picture on every page before they read. And I just sometimes question if that's necessary. I don't want to give away the ending to the book because then why would they want to read it, right? I want to leave some mystery, something that they want to read for, because usually at level A, the ending is funny or different. When I use pictures to talk about something before the text, I typically won't go through all of the pictures. I just might show them a few things. I want the book to be interesting to them, and I also don't want this book intro to drag on forever, right? I want to give them a little teaching, but I need them to still be doing work. So that's why very rarely do I do a complete picture walk. When I say complete, I mean every page. Okay, so then they read the text, of course. They are whisper reading on their own and finger pointing, so using their finger to point. And we're not all reading it together. They're reading it quietly to themselves. They might be on different pages, and that's fine. And during this part, I'm listening in. And if a child makes a mistake, as tempted as I might be to correct it immediately, I want to see if they notice. So even if I'm listening in and I hear a mistake, I'm going to wait for them to finish that page and see if they notice. See if they notice that it didn't sound right or it looked funny. So I always try to hold back and only say something if they don't notice after they finish the page. I like to use nonverbal cues during this portion to remind them to use strategies. And I was working several years ago with some little friends, kindergarten friends, and so I've used like strategy menus before, and that works with some kids. But a lot of my kids just needed to work on like one strategy at a time. So what I did is I put these little strategies on individual cards. And I know there's 2 here, but often I would just have 1 card up on the table. You can do it in front of each child. You can even differentiate if they need to work on different strategies, but you just kind of, if they get stuck or they look at you for help, what I will often do is I will just point to the strategy and that will show them what to do. Obviously, I'll have taught this before, but just that one little card on the table can be really helpful. You don't have to interrupt their thinking by doing a lot of talking or teaching. You just point to it, to get them to use it and then move on. If the kids finish early, or if some of the kids finish early and they're not all done, I just have them reread. And then this other thing I want to point out here, if you find that your level A books are taking a long time, then strangely enough, the book is probably too hard, or the level is probably too hard for them, or they might need more supportive teaching to be successful. Sometimes I've, just been like, okay, like why are we taking so long to get through these simple books? And the fact is, there's too much work in the book. It's such a hard balance of finding like a little bit of work where they're reading with 90 to 94% accuracy, but not so much work that it's dragging out. So if you find that your guided reading lessons are taking too long, at level A or any level really, just consider the level of the text. After we read the book, I have them retell with support. I always have them go back to the text just to get in that habit when they're retelling. If I can, I'll ask a higher level question or 2, which can be hard at level A, but you can ask something like, what else could you add to this book? Like if you were going to add another page, or what was the most important part and why? Did you like the ending? Why or why not? I encourage them to make inferences from the pictures because a lot of the meaning is carried in the picture at this level. And I ask a lot of how do you know? So again, that's getting them to go back to the book, not just accepting their answers. I don't want them, like when I ask a question, I give and they give an answer. I don't want them to be waiting on me to be like, or no, that's not it. I want them to prove. I want them to prove to themselves that they are correct. How do you know? So they're finding that page, looking at the picture or the text for evidence. I mentioned before that this is usually when I do the strategy teaching point. And sometimes I'll notice that a child used a strategy, one particular student used a strategy that other kiddos could have benefited from. So I might say, hey, when so-and-so was reading this page, he said the first sound and that helped him figure out the word. Or maybe you found that your kids were not using a strategy, but they should have been using one. You can model it. You can show it to them or reteach. You've already covered it before in the past. Key for level A. At level A, they're, oh no, sound disconnected. It must be my internet. Can you guys hear me now? I'm back? Okay, yay. Sorry about that. I think maybe it's the internet being fussy. Okay, anyway, this is key. So hopefully you guys can reconnect if it's fuzzy. Reconnect if it's fuzzy. Hopefully you guys can hear me now because this is something that's super important for level A. The kids often at level A, they're using the picture so much, and that's fine, but what we don't want to teach them, we don't want them to believe that reading is just looking at the picture and guessing. We do not want that, right? So with level A, what we can do is after they read the book and they use lots of, picture cues, then you can take your copy of the text and you can cover up with your hands or index cards or sticky notes. You can cover up the pictures and then have them reread the text just off of your copy using the letter cue. So they're actually having to look more closely at the first letter of the word. and actually use their phonics knowledge as opposed to just looking at the pictures. So rereading the book and covering up the text is often something that we do when we're working on a strategy. And down here I just wrote, if you're working on a strategy in shared reading or some other type of whole group instruction, tie it into this teaching point here, right? It's great if these kids need something different. You can provide that to them during the small group instruction. However, if you can tie it into what you're already teaching, what you're already working on, then that makes a lot of sense too. I also mentioned with the level A, if we have time, we might do one of these things. Picture sorts for phonological awareness. So that could be sets of rhyming pictures. That could be sorting pictures by their number of syllables or first sound, depending on what the kids need. We could make some sight words or high frequency words, or letter formation, making other very simple CVC words, and then some sentence writing or cut aparts, similar to what we would do at the pre-A level. And then I talked about for your dictation, if you're having them write, you could maybe go to 3 or 5 words. Oh, I got ahead of myself. I showed you all these things, or I talked about all these things already with picture sorts. But I do want to talk about this issue of kids getting stuck at level A. So sometimes what we find is kids can read level A books okay, and they're using lots of picture clues, but they're stuck, right? They can't move up to level B. And a big problem that I've encountered anyway is that sometimes students come to believe that reading is guessing, right? They think that reading is all about looking at the picture, and maybe they use the first letter sometimes, but they're not really reading. And so if they spend a ton of time at that level A, they're gonna believe that all books have a pattern, right? And they can just guess a lot of the words, and that's not what we want. So if I find that a student is stuck at level A or a group is stuck at level A, we'll start using more decodable books. So in a decodable book, or sometimes you can have like sight word readers or high frequency word readers, there's not as much of a pattern, right? They actually have to maybe read some very simple CVC words, use their sight word knowledge. So basically you're just getting them to break the pattern and actually forcing them to do more reading, as opposed to always having them do those books that are like, I like this, I see a blank, I see a blank, right? And then another thing you can do is you can put them in level B text and pre-teach them some of the words. So maybe level B is too hard, and that's fine, right? But give it to them anyway. Level B books tend to break the pattern a little bit, and so you can maybe give them a little bit more support, but you want them to understand that all books are not going to have that simple pattern. You want them to have to do more actual reading. So that's why just putting them in level B is sometimes what they need to move ahead. All right, so now let's talk quickly about levels B, C, and D. We're not going to spend nearly as much time because they're pretty similar to level A. Readers at level B are becoming more successful with matching written and spoken words one-to-one. They're continuing to rely heavily on pictures to figure out the meaning and even read words. Level B books will often have 2 or more lines of print. So usually in level A, it's just 1 line, and sometimes in level B, it tracks below too. And readers at level B are successful with books that are mostly patterned. So still, the book may break the pattern at the end, there's more sight words, but there's still somewhat of a pattern. The real differences between like a level A and level B, the way I do it, is that sometimes we'll spend more time making things like CVC words because they're getting into that. Sometimes the sentences are longer that they write. Maybe you can do 5 words, 6 words, 7 words. Other differences, you're not really working so much on letter sounds anymore. You're doing sight words. But again, the whole format, at least the way I do it, it's more or less following the same structure here. You're just kind of increasing the difficulty of the book level, and then the kids are going to need to work on different things as far as phonics goes. Level C, readers at level C are becoming more fluent. They have solidified their understanding of those important print concepts. Left to right is not a problem. Matching one word to one spoken word to one written word is not a problem. They can read text over multiple lines. Some kids at level C and above are going to have less of a need to point, right? So you don't have to tell them you can't point anymore, but if you feel like a kiddo would benefit and become more fluent from not pointing one-to-one, then you can ask them to try to read just with their eyes, or at least try that on the second read. It's not something that I do with all of my kids, but for those kids who are ready. Level C is when they begin reading dialogue. They also begin reading more verbs with inflectional endings, so that end with S, ing, or ed. Again, the suggested lesson format is super similar to level B. Doing more with word making. Phonics, again, is getting harder, but generally speaking, this is all pretty much the same. The time that they spend reading the actual book increases because the books are getting longer and they're getting harder. And then last but not least, we have guided reading for level D. So this is what Heinemann, Fountas, and Bunnell say is the goal for end of the year kindergarten. I will tell you for sure, not all of your kids are going to get there. I mean, maybe they can. I will tell you for sure that not all of my kids get there. I've never had a class that all got to level D, and maybe yours do, and that's amazing. But this is their benchmark. I just haven't found that all kids are always able to get there. So anyway, if you do have some kiddos that end up at level D, their books are less patterned. They're getting some 2-syllable words in there, and they're also starting to understand split dialogue, and you may want to go over that with them. So, you know, moms, or blah, blah, blah. I will go to the store, mom said, would you like to come with? So that's split dialogue. If your kiddos are ready to read without pointing, this is something that you can start to encourage at level D. And then this is the lesson format. Again, it is in your freebie. Very similar, just pretty much the phonics work that you're doing, and then they're going to be learning different strategies as well. And then I mentioned I wanted to talk really quick about those kiddos that are above level D. Okay, so you might have some kids who maybe they're reading at level E or F or G. I said this at the beginning, but successful coding does not necessarily equal comprehension. Just something to keep in mind. I know that you probably know that. But even if they're decoding words, you want to use some type of assessment to make sure that they're actually comprehending both literally and being able to make inferences at whatever level you believe that they are. Something you can do if you have maybe just one outlier, a higher reader, is check with other kindergarten teachers. See if they have other kids who they can send to your classroom and make a guided reading group. If you have an outlier, another thing you can do is confer with them individually, where you're challenging them at their level, which again is hard when there's a lot of kids, but you want to also make sure that they still have time and opportunities for group discussions. So what you can do is they can go with your highest guided reading group maybe once a week, and then you confer with them individually. Another thing that you can do is pull them in a small group for a read aloud or a shared reading, like I mentioned earlier. You can also do a strategy group where maybe you have a reader who's at level F, and then you have a guided reading group that's at level D, but they all need to work on the strategy of like skip a word and then come back to it. You can teach them that strategy. It doesn't have to be at all their perfect levels, but you can pull them together, teach them that strategy, even if they are at different reading levels. And that's another opportunity for them to participate in a small group activity and a discussion. Okay, so we've gone over a lot today. Remember, if you didn't get the slides before, I will be sending those out, but I know a lot of you shared the link, so hopefully you have got those slides, but they will be emailed out because I know we went over a lot. Now it is time, though, for our giveaway and freebie. So if sound has been cutting in and out, I apologize. I'm not sure. I don't think it's my internet connection. I think it might be the software. Not sure why we've had trouble with that tonight, but I will make sure to write down all of the winners' names just in case your sound does go out. So don't worry if you miss something. All right, so this is the giveaway. In a second, I'm going to pull some names. And the winner of tonight's giveaway is going to get this pre-A resource that I have, and they're also going to get to choose a bundle. I do have a couple other guided reading bundles, but I just pulled out the kindergarten appropriate ones since this is a kindergarten guided reading workshop. But so you are going to get, if you're a giveaway winner, a pre-A resource and one of these bundles of your choice. So let's talk about what the pre-A resource is. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but with pre-A, you saw all those things that are important to cover. And that means a lot of materials, a lot of like switching things in and out, right? And that can take up time. When you only have maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that switching out of materials takes up time. So I developed this little binder system to spend less time doing that. And it really has worked well. And it's also cut down on my prep time. So when you make the binders to begin with, yeah, it does take some time to set up, but then you are good to go. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. Also, this kind of goes along with like having your materials ready. Just it's helpful to have everything in one place because I can't even, so I have like a little desk or table for a reading intervention. After a lesson, sometimes it just looks like there was a hurricane. There's picture cards here and there's this there. And the binders really help, especially at that pre-A level where there's so many different things that they need to work with. It just helps me keep everything in one place. So that's why I developed this. So one component of this pre-A resource is the teacher planning guide. And what I did here is I took that lesson outline, that lesson format, and set it up for you. So you just you choose an activity that teaches letter sounds, for example, or phonological awareness. These activities are all included in the resource, and then you just check off which one you're doing. You can make notes, but it's like super easy, super fast planning. You can, so if you want to print out the teacher manual and spiral bind it, yeah, that's what I did. However, you can also just pull it up on your iPad or your laptop to use if you want to save paper. But this book has all the different activities and things that you can do with your kiddos. So here's the part that I was talking about with saving time when it comes to getting out materials. What I did is I made a binder for each student. And when I say each student, I don't mean like I've got 20 pre-A kids and I made 20 binders. No, you just make a binder for every student so that every student in your pre-A group or groups can have a binder. And it's not even their binder. They like switch it between themselves. It doesn't matter whose is whose. You just need a binder for every kid, if that makes sense. So the pages, things like this letter sounds chant where we go apple, apple, and we practice tracking and we practice sounds. Like pages like this are in there and I put them in a page protector. I have to put them in a page protector, but it just helps a little bit with making them reusable. So each kid's binder will have a ton of activities. You don't use them in every single lesson, but they're there so that you're not constantly having to pull new stuff and prep them. And there's a little animal on every page. So when you're ready to use like this page, you can just say, okay, turn to the page, or there's like a handwriting page, turn to the page with a little elephant on it. So it makes the pages easier to find for the kiddos. So then of course you are gonna need things like magnetic letters and books for them to read, but those manipulatives, it creates less like clutter and it just saves me time when I'm trying to grab everything and put them together. So of course we use hands-on stuff as well, and a lot of hands-on stuff goes with the binder pages, but we've got all those printable materials in one place, and it is a sanity saver. So that was the pre-A resource, and that's structured differently because, like we talked about tonight, pre-A readers have different needs, right? My guided reading bundles are a little bit different because it's more, the kids are actually reading the text and they can just do a little bit more. Now, these are the bundles that I have listed for kindergarten, and it's a lot of different bundles for kindergarten. But this bundle, the A through C bundle, is if you've got kids that tend to be quite low. Maybe you have English language learners. A through D is if you usually have a low to average class. A through E is if you'd say you have like an average class. And then A through J is if you tend to have a lot of high readers. So I consider these kindergarten bundles in one way or another, but it just kind of depends on what type of students you usually have. All right, so for these bundles, there are printable books. There are printable books for pre-A also, but these are longer, obviously. This is not a kindergarten level, by the way. I realized that I put a much harder level than typically would be for kindergarten here, but obviously there's less text on the kindergarten pages. You get a complete lesson plan for every book. There's an option where it's a 1-day lesson or a 2-day lesson. That is totally up to you, whichever one you want to use. And then the books, they are color, but you can also print them in black and white. You can do them single-sided, double-sided, so there's some flexibility there. You also get assessment resources. You get a running record form for each one of the books, and then blank running record forms to use with your own books. There's also these reading behaviors rubrics where if you're, working with kids at level C, it really spells out like what kind of things should you be looking for, and you can rate your kids on how they're doing with each of those skills. There's tons of visuals. So yes, there's specific books and specific lessons, but in the guided reading pack is also tons of stuff that you can use with your own books. Maybe you've got Rigby readers, you've got level text that you want to use. That's great. You can still use all of this stuff with your own books. There's also a lot of different activities that can be used for comprehension, again, with any book. So there's like a question cube. One of the higher levels has a question spinner, so it's flexible stuff. And then there's word studies, some printable materials for every level. And there's also suggestions for activities that don't require you to do any prep. So sometimes you might want to work on letter sounds, but you don't have time to prep. There are directions for different activities that are just like, use magnetic letters to do this or do that. But there's also other stuff that you can print and prep if you want to do that. Alrighty, let's go ahead and do our giveaway. I will again write down all of the winners' names because I know our sound has not been fabulous today, which I apologize for. But here's how it works. So I'm gonna call a name and an email address. If it's you, and only if it's you, please just write that you're here in the chat box. If you have not heard your name, I just ask that you don't type anything in the chat box for just a minute to leave it open for the winners, because I would not want it to fill up and then not to be able to get their name in there. So if you're not hearing your name, please don't type anything, just to free up that chat box for the winners. Alrighty, my list. Okay, first winner is Brandy. It's BRANDEE 305 at AOL. Brandy, if you're here, let me know in the chat box. And I'm also gonna need you, Brandy, to email me. Just respond to one of those reminder emails and tell me which bundle you want. I would get the A through J if I were you. Just, go for the biggest one, but it's totally up to you. And then you'll also get that pre-A resource. So Brandy, let me know if you're here. Julie J. McKinnon 7 at Yahoo. Julie, let me know if you're here. So we've got Brandy, Julie, just writing these down in case we have any issues. Okay, next winner is Mandy, MANDIE, Dre at Yahoo. Mandy, let me know if you're here. Next winner is Aurelie Mejorado at Gmail. Aurelie, let me know if you're here. Okay. Next winner is Pam, P. Bertrand at coes.org. Pam, let me know if you're here. I'm gonna pull two more. Mandy's here. Awesome. Congratulations. Misty, MISTURNER at Hotmail. Misty, let me know if you're here. And last but not least, the last winner is going to be Danielle, Klein Danielle at Gmail. Danielle, let me know if you are here, and then make sure to email me and let me know which bundle you would like. All right, so congrats to our winners. If your name was not pulled, but this seems like something, the pre-A resource or one of the bundles seems like something that would be helpful to you, I do have a sale. Whenever I do a webinar, I generally put the resources. Thank you for attending. So all of this stuff in my TPT store is going to be 20% off Friday at midnight, which is actually midnight Eastern time, midnight Eastern US time. It automatically turns off. So if you feel like you need some of this stuff for next year, make sure that or this year, make sure that you grab it before Friday. I put the TPT link up there. Should maybe be by the chat box for you. If you don't see it, I do email it out also in emails afterwards, so keep a lookout for that. But then now I know we've gone a little over an hour, so thanks for hanging with me. I want to put up the freebie. This is one of my favorite freebies that I created for my summer workshop series, so I hope you enjoy it. It's got some games, it's got the assessment. hopefully some helpful stuff for you. If the freebie does not work for whatever reason, again, not to worry. I will send an email out. I usually set it up ahead of time, and I think it should be going out maybe in about 45 minutes. If you do not get the email with the links and everything by tomorrow night, just email me and say, hey, I didn't get it, and I'll be happy to send everything over so that you can make sure you get the freebie and also the recording. And if you're watching live, you'll get a certificate. You'll get the TPT link. Everything will be in there. All right. One last thing before I let you go, I want to put in the workshops that I mentioned. I talked about the Literacy Center workshops because tonight we were really just talking about what the kids are doing who are actually with us in the group, right? So I have a whole other workshop, which is a whole other hour on what the kids are actually doing. And that's not just kindergarten, it's K2. But so the one I'm gonna share first is just like a how I do literacy centers in general. That one is not live. And the one that I'm teaching live this summer, I'm gonna put the link up for that. That's how to launch literacy centers. So not to be confusing, but I'm putting a link up here in a sticky note in a second. And one is going to be just how to do literacy centers in general. And then another one is going to be how to launch literacy centers. So how to, organize everything at the beginning of the year and get the kids going. So I'm putting both of those things in a sticky note. You should see a little sticky message at the top there. If it's not working for you for some reason, you can also just go to learningattheprimarypond.com and click on workshops, and you can see the launching one at least. So if you have to leave us, I appreciate you being here. I know it's been over an hour, so thanks for hanging with me, and I apologize for any tech issues. I hope it wasn't too bad on your end. Not really sure what happened there, but thank you for being here. But if you can stay, I would love to answer some more questions and just chat with you a little bit more. Thanks to everybody who was participating in the chat and just sharing ideas. I really appreciate it. So if I missed your question, it definitely wasn't intentional, but if you could just retype it, that would be super helpful to me, because when I scroll and scroll, it gets lost with all those questions, with all the wonderful chat we've had tonight. So please feel free to retype your question. And if you have to leave us, thanks for coming. Kate, I'm glad you liked the freebie. Oh, thank you. Amy said the Literacy Centers workshops are amazing. Awesome. Okay, Carolyn's having downloading trouble. So Carolyn, she wasn't able to download the PowerPoint. That is weird. Carolyn, I would just email me. I can maybe share it another way, but Carolyn, wait and see if the email that I set up that goes to you, see if those work by any chance. Oh, one question that I meant to answer and I did not. How many kids are in each group? So in kindergarten, I really try not to have more than 5 kids in a group. At those lower groups, pre-A, if I can have 3, I feel like that's the sweet spot. But sometimes might have to have 4, ideally not 5. But my rule of thumb is the lower the group, the lower the number of group members. Amy, the certificates are going to get emailed to you. So watch your email. If you don't get anything by tomorrow night, then I would say email me and let me know. Catherine says, how do we get 20% off? Okay, so you don't need a coupon or anything like that. Catherine, I'll put up the link again, but those links that are here, that I put up here and that are in my TPT store, those are already discounted for you. I just set it up ahead of time. Okay, Stacy says, are the books for level A through C the same in each of the different bundles? Yes, Stacy, so when I bundle them together, it's like level A, the level A stuff that's in here is the same level A stuff that's in like the level A through D and here and here. Good question. Okay, Adair says, do you teach any of these phonics skills, letter sounds, identification, sight words? Whole group? Yes. Or is all of your phonics instruction done in guided reading? Yes. So what I do, Adair, is we work, obviously, like I've talked about tonight, we work on stuff in small group, but whole group, I teach 3-ish letters a week. I usually start out with like 2 for the first couple of weeks, and then we move on to 3. And so once we've gone through the entire alphabet, then I might go back and review some. But I like to, I prefer not to do a letter of the week because It takes a really long time for us to go get through all 26 letters. So I like to expose them to the letters, and the kids that pick up on it, they pick up on it, and they can use that in their reading and writing. They have access to it. And then I just go back and review. And after I've taught it all whole group, then it becomes a lot more small group where I see like, oh, this group of kids needs to work on these letters, and this group needs to work on these letters. So I feel like it's valuable to do all whole group at the beginning to get through the letters relatively quickly. But then after that, I do a lot more differentiating in small groups. Okay. Debbie says, what guided reading level should a kindergarten student be on at the end of the year? So Debbie, I guess it depends on who you ask. So Fountas and Bunnell say level D. My personal belief is that not all kindergartners will be ready for a level D by the end of the year. Maybe all of yours are, and that's awesome. But in my experience, like if I can get them to a C, then I consider that like, I feel like they're going to be okay in first grade. Doesn't always happen for all kids, but level D is what some people will say. Terry, you're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Barbara says, cute freebie. Thank you. You're welcome. Kayleen says, someone asked about how do you ensure the concept of word in relation to sight words. So I'm not sure that I have like a super hard and fast answer to that. Maybe somebody does, but can the child, like if you have like a little book, I'm trying to like see if I have anything right here, but I don't think I do. If you have like a book and you say, you know, like show me a word, can they use their two fingers and show you what a word is? Do they get that like if you say a word, then that's a combination of letters in print. So it's just really that like print concept. Angie, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Irma says, thank you for a great workshop. I bought one of the bundles last summer and my students love to work with it. Now after this workshop, I feel a lot more confident. Awesome. Thank you, Irma. Crystal says, do you feel these activities will work in one-on-one situations? I know for sure, Crystal, because with reading intervention, that's at this current time, that's what I'm doing, and this is what I use it for as well. So developed for groups, but also for sure works in a one-on-one setting. Melissa, the free packet is going to be emailed to you, so all those links should be coming your way. Anastasia says the bundle for pre-A and levels A through J, separate purchases. Yeah, so Anastasia, because the pre-A is just set up differently because they have different needs, they're separate, and I don't have any bundles that are everything together. Patty says, I just registered for your Literacy Center webinars. How will I find out about future webinars? So Patty, as long as you are on my email list, then when I have new webinars coming out, I will email out. However, I did already email out for the summer, Patty, and so if you need to see what's coming next, I have a bunch of live workshops planned, and if you go to learningattheprimarypond.com and click on workshops, I'll put the little link in the chat box here, but you can see what's coming up, and then I will periodically email out, and I'll let you know if I have something new planned beyond that. Catherine, no code needed. The sale should be set up. I will double check that it is, but I believe it should be good to go. Heather says, this year I was thinking I would have my assistant focus on phonological awareness in her groups while I do guided groups. That's awesome, Heather. It's so helpful to have an assistant because then like when there are so many different things that you want to get in, like you can have her focus on one thing. I think that's awesome. Erica says, what would be your recommendation for multi-grades? I have pre-K through third. So Erica, I'm curious if these are like regular education students. I do have a bundle, Erica, and it's also on sale. I just didn't show it here. But I do have a bundle that's A through N. And Erica, A through N is like kindergarten through early third grade. So that would probably be the bundle that I would look at if you do have that big of a range. Okay, Lynn, thank you. I'm glad that was helpful. Nicole, so Nicole, the Lit Center's webinar tomorrow, remember that's the one that I said was not live. So that is a recording. The Launching Literacy Center's webinar is live. So that one will be live. And just the Basic Literacy Center's webinar is a recording because I have a lot of teachers who are wanting to see it at different times. So I show that as a recording now. Caitlin says, do you think the class learns sight words better in a whole or small group? I feel like that's so tricky. So on one hand, Caitlin, I feel like it's helpful to have this core set of words that, you know, everybody's responsible for and everybody knows. And so there will be at least a small set of words that I do class-wide. That's not as many words as I tend to do small group. Because like you said, it's helpful when they match the level of the text that they're reading, right? Like I don't want to be doing so much whole group that like my kids that are really low, they're not getting any of it, right? So I keep like a small subset of words that we're all working on, but then we might do differentiated sight words in or high frequency words in a small group setting. Sarah, the bundle, I don't have a bundle for pre-A, but the pre-A resource is pretty large, so there's a lot of stuff in it. Okay, Danita says, when and how do kids change groups? Awesome question. So because I'm taking those running records, Danita, I'm kind of constantly aware of like, okay, like, is this level of book tricky for them? Do I actually need to move them down? Did I misplace them? Or do I need to move them up? Like it's becoming too easy for them. If I find that kids are reading at a kindergarten level 95 to 100% of the words correctly and their comprehension is very good, then I will typically move them up. I want them to be on the higher end because usually when I do the running record, like I said, it's a warm read. So I want them to be getting up to like, you know, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100% before I feel like I might be able to move them up a group. And as far as when that happens, it's really fluid because I generally sit down and look at their running records about once a week. I will take them, but I don't necessarily like have time to sit down and analyze them right away. So like every Thursday when I do my planning, I'll look at all the running records and score them, whatever. And then at that time, that's typically when I ask myself, like, does somebody need to move up? And stuff like that. Catherine, I'm glad that was helpful. Susan, yes, the winners have been announced. Let me check the list. Susan, you are not on the list, but they've already been announced. Kathy, you're welcome. Awesome. Nicole says, could I use the guided reading resource levels A through J for first grade also? Absolutely. So A through J is also what I would consider a first grade bundle too. Alexandra, thank you. I appreciate you coming. Okay. Jessica, I'm not 100% sure I understand your question. So she says, would the pre-A bundle be best for a 12-1-1 kindergarten classroom? I'm not familiar. Is that number of teachers and students? Maybe if you could clarify for me. Sorry. I mean, I don't have activity binders for other levels. This is really the way I did it is specific to pre-A because there was just so much stuff. Let's see. Crystal says, what do you do if the child is much older and is still a very early reader B, but because they're older, they find the K books too boring and have no interest? So Crystal, there are these books called, I actually don't have them, but I'm aware of them. They're high-low books. So they are meant for older readers, but they're at lower levels. So if you just Google search for high-low books, then you probably will find what I'm talking about. I think High Noon might publish them. Rebecca, the winners were Julie McKinney, Brandy, Mandy, Aurelie, Pam, Misty, and Danielle Klein. Okay, Nicole says, I've taught first grade for 4 years. They've been moved by kinder. Oh, good, I'm glad. Not as nervous about it anymore. Awesome, I am so glad, Nicole. That makes me super happy. I hope that you love kinder. I hate to play favorites, but kindergarten is by far my favorite because they just grow so much. And I actually knew a teacher who, we taught at the same school. We both ended up moving schools, but she ended up teaching kinder, moving down from first. And I totally didn't expect her to love kindergarten because she loved first and was so good with first. And she was pretty strict, but when she moved down to kinder, she found that she just absolutely loved how cute they are, obviously, but just how much they grow in the year. So I hope that you love kinder too. I will be emailing out freebie and all the links, yes. And the slides. Somebody found High Noon Publishers. Elena, thank you. Sharon says, does the bundle have the same number of pages as the individual bundles? Yes, it's just if you get level A, the same level A is in here, and the same level B is in here, and the same level C. Erin is moving to K after 9 years in second. Awesome. I'm excited for you. Jessica, you're welcome. Good luck with your first year. I hope to see you on some other webinars too. Ashley says, any suggestions on how to help some struggling readers going into first? Ashley, a lot of what I would do with them is stuff that I mentioned here. I would say, I don't know what your teaching situation is, Ashley, if you're maybe a first grade teacher and you have some struggling readers at the beginning of the year. I would say the faster you can start with intervention and seeing them, the better. So at the beginning of the year, I do like to set up procedures and routines, but in first and second grade, if I see that some kids are really struggling, I will still make time to see them either one-on-one or in small groups as quickly as I can toward the beginning of the year, just to try to hopefully set them on the right track. Lots of friends moving to kindergarten. That's awesome. Kristen, off topic, did you do memory books and how? So I have the kids make these little memory books where it's just like they're drawing and writing about the year, but I also do, I like to take photos throughout the year and just did like a really simple thing that I sent home, nothing fancy. Dana says, this is my first year in kinder as well. Had been teaching first, had no clue where to start. Good, I'm glad you're feeling a little better. Yeah, Ashley, I would honestly just do a lot of what I talked about here. Try to hit them with the intervention as quickly as possible in the year. Debbie says, this is my 38th year teaching kindergarten. Awesome, that's amazing. Same room, same school, best place ever. Absolutely, that's awesome, Debbie. All right, you all. Well, I've had you here for an hour and a half. I appreciate you hanging out for so long. Appreciate you sticking out any of the tech issues. I hope that you got some helpful ideas, and I hope that the freebie is fun and helpful for you. And if you didn't get it for some reason by tomorrow night, just email me. You can reach me just by replying to any of those reminder messages. It will get to my inbox, and then I'm happy to help you get what you need or answer questions that I may have missed. If I did miss your question, it 100% was not on purpose. So feel free to email me. I do have more webinars, which I talked about before, but if you would like to sign up for more, just go to my website. It's learningattheprimarypond.com. Click on workshops. All of those listed under workshops are live workshops for this summer. So hopefully I will see you on a future webinar, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening or day wherever you are in the world.